Am I having blush blindness? Okay, can.
Hi everybody, welcome back to The Next Move, where we look at factors that affect your property decisions and what are some of the things that you should consider before your next move. When we look at the residential market in Singapore, you'll realize that 50% of all transactions, if you average it out across the past 10 to 15 years, are actually new launch properties. Now, in today's episode, we want to examine why is it that 50% of the transactions on a month-to-month basis remains focused on the new launch market. There are two big groups of reason and 10 factors that contribute towards it. The first is in terms of capital efficiency, which means that for the amount of money that I'm investing into real estate, which one takes my money further? New launches has several strengths to that, including your progressive payment, including the lack of COV, and including a reduced takeover renovation costs. Now, secondly, we are also looking at your exit audience and your exit strategy. So for new launch properties, you have the widest group of exit audience and also this thing called the TOP effect, which is unique to only the new launch market, which allows you to have the maximal capital appreciation at exit. First, let's dive into capital efficiency. Firstly, looking at capital efficiency, for the amount of capital that you have deployed into your asset class, which one basically gives you a better investment of your money. Now, in terms of new launch properties, we have this factor called progressive payment. What does progressive payment mean? For both new launch and resale properties, there are a certain set of down payments that we need to make. 75% of your property is basically on your loan basis. And what is unique about new launch properties is basically that right at the start, your full 75% loan is not disbursed. In fact, new launch properties in Singapore follow a progressive payment scheme, which aligns with the developer's timeline of building your property. So in Singapore, it takes about 3 to 4 years for your new launch property to build. Basically, at every juncture, the developer only calls for that percentage of your loan from your bank. What this means is that your monthly mortgage is not at, if you are buying a resale property, it could immediately start at, for example, 4K every single month. This is already cost that is incurred. Right? But basically, if you're buying a new launch property, it can start at a few $100s, for example, 600, maybe 1,000, and so on and so forth. So when you are buying into a new launch property, basically what it means is that for the first 1 to 2 years, and even up to the stage of TOP, the full 75% loan is not called. The full loan is only called upon CSC, which usually happens within 6 to 12 months of TOP. If you're an investor that has other vehicles of investment, for example, stocks, or you are investing in, for example, crypto, or if your money can be working hard for you in other vehicles and assets, then what is unique is that while the down payment and the cash outlay is the same, of course, there are also other costs involved, such as your buyer stamp duty. But basically, with this combined 25%, you are able to enjoy a lesser monthly mortgage and outlay on your new launch property. The second factor of why investors love to buy new launch properties is basically the fact that you have no COV. Now, what is COV? COV basically stands for cash over valuation. So for anybody that is familiar with the real estate market, when you enter into a resale property, usually, your realtor should send a text to your banker and ask, hey, I'm looking at a property that is 2 mil. Can you match the valuation? And then your banker will basically say, okay, actually, this property is valued at 2.2 mil. So you getting it at 2 mil is a really good deal, right? So cash over valuation is basically the part that is above the price that the bank values your property at. So again, back to the 2 mil example. If, for example, you are buying a property and you are paying 2 mil, and you call your banker, hey, Mr. Banker, I want to buy my property at 2 mil. Can you match the valuation? And your banker says, oh, I cannot match the valuation at 2 mil. Basically, I can only match at 1.7 mil. This margin of 300K is something that you will have to pay in cash. When your bank disburses the loan, they will only give you up to 75% of your max valuation or your purchase price. So in the event that the bank cannot match this 300K, this amount has to be forked out in cash. And in another episode where we will talk about leverage in the real estate market, we'll realize that how important is this cash component, because if you have to fork out this portion in cash, then basically you are unable to, what we say, get the full leverage for this property. And in a new launch asset or new launch, in the new launch market, basically at launch, the developers set the price. In that case, the banks will always be able to match, and there will not be this issue of the banks not being able to match your property price. Okay, so that is your no COV, which basically means that you do not have that risk of your banks not being able to match. Talking about the third factor, basically, is your takeover costs. Now, all of us know that in the real estate market, there are actually several kinds of costs involved, right? We always think that, maybe my basic cost is just buying the house, maybe some maintenance, maybe the buyer stamp duty, legal fees, those are costs. There are also costs involved with buying over something that is, of course, older versus new. Now, when we buy a new versus an older property, what basically happens is that we get to save on our renovation costs when we take over. In terms of new launch property, there's also this thing called a defects liability period, which for a period of 1 year after you have taken over your property, basically you will get to enjoy your developer being the one to fix any kinds of structural damages within that 1 year period. So it already saves you this kind of first kind of investment cost. When we buy a new property, a new launch property, basically your flooring is already done, your aircons are done. Basically, the only things that are not done are your lights, your curtains, your blinds. When we buy an older property, actually sometimes we will also get to enjoy some of the renovations and some of the fittings that the seller has already done. For example, if we buy into a designer property, then it already comes with the renovation and we save on the renovation time as well. Now, while that is true, oftentimes that time that you save and that money that the owner has placed into renovations is often passed on to the new buyer, right? So when you buy something old, either A, if it's not renovated, you have to pump in that renovation time and cost. But if B, it is renovated, then maybe that cost is also passed on to you in terms of the selling price. All right, let's look at the fourth factor in terms of why people love to buy new launch properties. And that is also in terms of other ongoing costs that is involved. So for example, if you were to buy a property and your main mindset is that you want to rent this out, right? So I'm going to insert a screenshot here of something that we have done for a previous seller, calculations on her property. So 1.5 million property, we rented out at 3.8K. And that is like an annual rental of 45,000, right? But when we really broke it down for the seller, what we realized is that actually the take home is only about 23,000 because of all the different costs involved. But not only do you have these, very hard costs like your MCST, your sinking funds, and also your let's say if you get a realtor to rent it out for you, there are also invisible costs involved. So what are these invisible costs involved? Basically, this has to do with managing your tenants, right? If you do not get a realtor to manage and to find a tenant for you, actually you will realize that sometimes managing tenants is a full-time job. There are a lot of things that tenants will be asking for. Hey, the microwave spoil, the aircon spoil, the heater spoil, or you have to find new tenants, and hopefully you get a good tenant. But if we have some tenants that are not taking a good care of the place, then that can be a real invisible cost and mental weight as well. All right, so we have looked at new launch properties in terms of capital efficiency, the first 4 factors. Firstly, is your progressive payment, the fact that you don't have to take on the direct monthly mortgage right at the start. You have basically the years, 3 to 4 years that the developer is building to slowly pay and increase the monthly mortgage, in which time your capital can be used to grow in other assets. Secondly, no cash over valuation. The developer set the asking price based on the market conditions and based on the what are the resale transactions as well as the future transactions. So basically, you will not have to have that cash over valuation component. Thirdly, in terms of takeover costs, of course, you save on your renovations. You also have the defects liability period to ensure that your property is in a good move-in condition. And lastly, in terms of ongoing costs, your MCST, all your fees, as well as the invisible cost of managing your tenant. Now, let's talk about the second part, which is basically your exit advantage. So as a seller buying a new launch property, why do people love to buy new launch properties? It's because they do enjoy 5 more factors with regard to the exit advantage. Now, what is exit advantage and how does it relate to new launch buyers? Talking about exit advantage, the most important thing and the biggest thing that we want to talk about is basically what we call the TOP effect. Now, the TOP effect, I'm sure this is a term that a lot of people who are interested in new launches, you have already heard about. It's quite a used term in the market, but it is a real phenomenon that only really happens to sellers that own a new launch property. Now, when we buy into a new launch property, so for example, you are buying into a new launch property at, let's say, maybe 2005 PSF. Okay, averagely everybody buys into the 3-bedder at this project at launch at 2005. Now, for all the sellers who have already waited this 4 years to sell, because now stamp duty is 4 years, and also because the construction period is about this 4 years, for anyone that has already waited this 4 years to basically exit, there will be this unspoken understanding that, okay, we have already spent all this time invested, and because of the future developments that have already happened around this area, we will want to see at least a 300, 350 PSF gain. So naturally, when they want to exit, for example, sellers will be looking at a asking PSF of 2.8K. Now, this is what we call really like a herd mentality, right? That everybody who has bought in to invest will simultaneously at the same time look for that asking price. And this is something that only happens at new launches. Because if we look at the resale buyer, what happens is that when I'm exiting as a resale buyer, there are so many different times, right? Let's say even in a 300-unit condo, maybe at any given point in time, maybe there's 30 to 60 people selling. And these are varying in terms of facing, varying in terms of bedroom sizes as well. So really, it is only in a new launch project that you get this once-in-a-lifetime chance where there are a group of people who are exiting at the same time. Now, of course, to take note is that this will also mean competition for you. We have seen projects where there are 60 of the same unit, right? 62 bidders selling at the same time. This makes it extremely competitive. So this is also something to take note when you're buying into a new launch property, and also to look into something that maybe you will have an edge over the others. But we won't go into that in this video. Okay, so TOP effect is number one. Secondly, we want to talk about the fact that, there's this 4 years, which we really call like kind of a set and forget. Right, which is that in the time period that we are buying into the new launch, in the time that it takes to construct, I can basically set and forget. This also relates back to the lack of invisible costs, right? That means during this time period, I don't have to worry about the property. I don't have to worry about anything. I just know that if I chose something at the right time and at the right season to enter, then basically I'll just set and forget, let my property grow, and 4 years later, I can exit. A third exit advantage that new launch buyers are hunting for or looking for basically is that they are hunting for what we call the third audience type. Now, what is unique about the third audience type is that this audience type basically doesn't exist outside of new launch properties. Now, what is this third audience type is that there are a very unique group of buyers in the market that basically they want to buy. Okay, so when we look at what are the first two audience types, basically it's new launch and it's resale, right? So new launch buyers, they buy a launch and then they wait maybe a couple of years, 4 years. For resale buyers, basically, they want something that they can move into immediately, right? So they can buy and basically it takes anywhere from maybe 8 to 12 weeks for your completion. And then they move into something that is already built. But there is a very unique third group of audience, and this audience is only available to people who are new launch sellers. And basically what is this? It's buyers that want to buy at TOP. Basically, they want something brand new, but they do not want that waiting time. Right, so basically, as a new launch seller, when we talk about exit advantage, you have this additional group of audience, and maybe it's also about buyers, or maybe it's also about people who want to rent. Right, they want something that is brand new, never lived in before, and they're looking to rent your project instead. Okay, number 4 in terms of exit advantage is basically your lease tenure. What we want to highlight to audiences that are watching this video is that there are 2 numbers that you need to look at when you zoom in to look at a property. Oftentimes, when developers market it, usually they will show the completed date, right? The completion date, which is the TOP date usually. So for example, this could be 2026. But one thing for buyers to take note is that you actually have to look at a more critical number, which affects your future buyer, and we call that the lease start date. So your lease start date can be anywhere from, let's say, 20, it really could be varying, right? Let's say if it's an en bloc project, it could take longer, but usually maybe, for example, we could say 2022, right? So this number matters because lease and tenure is not just something that buyers think about or they talk about. And it is not just about how new is your project. It really is about financial implications for your next buyer. So there are two critical numbers when we talk about lease for buyers, 60 and 30. Now, when your lease has reached 30, basically your buyers will not be able to take a bank loan and they will not be able to touch into their CPF. At 60, we call this pretty critical number. While they are still able to take a bank loan, there are implications on their CPF. So this is where your buyers will start to get a bit cautious, or your buyer pool will actually reduce in terms of people who can afford your property. So in terms of lease, now of course in new launch property, we are starting at if we're talking about 99 years, then it starts at 99 years. And by the time you TOP, perhaps that's already 5 years into your lease versus something that is maybe 10, 20 years old. Now there are last two factors that make buyers consider buying a new launch property versus a resale property. And basically it was something that is really unique and fun, I think, is basically your unit selection. Now, as a buyer who is buying to new launch, if you are lucky and if you basically have a good queue number, and I know that my teammate here has basically gotten number 1 with his client before, I have never had such luck. But basically, if you have such good luck as them, you are able to choose your unit from basically any set, any facing, right? And why is unit selection important? It is not only important in terms of what we call, choice, right? The ability of choice. Unit selection also impacts entry price. So as a buyer, maybe you're thinking, no, I like high floor, I like pool facing, or I like landed facing, I like things like that. As your consultant, we are thinking for you in terms of, okay, all the different facings, which one makes the most sense in terms of entry price? And then we basically combine the two to help you choose the most ideal unit, right? In the resale market, there are only at a couple of times, maybe 1 to 2 or very, very limited units that fits your criteria and your selection. But at launch, if you get a good number, you are basically able to choose from different units, and we are able to tailor for you the entry price to which to enter each of these different units, such that you are buying something that has the maximum chance of exiting in the future. Now, the last factor that we want to talk about is basically the fact that it is new. Now, why does something new matter? It is really not about just the facilities, the design, but basically the fact that developers and architects are always studying the market trends. They're always tailoring the project sizes, the project efficiencies to match the needs of future buyers. So when we buy something new, basically we're buying something that is the most considered in the market right now. Of course, there are buyers that prefer all layouts, all types. But if you buy into something new, it basically means that there's already a group of developers who are studying the market trends and trying to see what is suitable for the market at the current point in time. All right, so for exit advantage, we talked about another 6 factors, making this 10 factors. And what are 6 factors? Basically, your TOP effect, the fact that there is that one chance to exit at increase and a jump PSF with everyone in your area. The second is the set and forget. The time that it takes to build the new launch is also basically your SSD time. So once it's done, you can choose to exit. Third is that a wider group of audience, including your third audience pool, which is unique to new launch buyers. Fourth is your lease and your tenure, which has direct implications on your buyer's financials. Fifth is your unit selection vis-a-vis the entry price. And sixth is, of course, the fact that it is brand new. Now, we hope that today's episode was interesting. We compared and we looked at reasons why people will be looking into new launch property versus resale. If you were to ask us, is new launch definitely way better than resale? Is resale better than new launch? There's no fixed answer. These are just 10 reasons why buyers will consider new launch. However, I think the resale market has many merits, and 50% of the transactions are still done on resale properties. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We're happy to have a further discussion. If you would like to link up with our team for a non-obligatory 45 minutes consultation, you can click on the link below. If you like what you've seen, please like and subscribe, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.